Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to do a video called A Guide to Sweden's Armored Force. This was sent to me, a video that was recommended on Discord. It's been recommended probably 4 or 5 times, and each time I've kind of like slotted away in my brain and been like, okay, I need to do this whenever I'm doing this topic or this topic, that sort of thing. And I always just forget to do it. So, since we just covered the armor that is being sent by the West to Ukraine, I thought, okay, I'm going to get this video in here. So let's jump into it. A guide to Sweden's armored force, sorry.
For Sweden, the return of war to Eastern Europe and Russia's annexation of Crimea shifted the calculus with regards to its armed forces. The end of the Cold War was supposed to be the end of history, the beginning of a new era of peace following the triumph of liberalism. In its aftermath, the Swedish army was rapidly reduced in scope through the 1990s and early 2000s, but at the same time...
Okay, sorry, I know this is really early to be stopping it, but before I forget, what was the thing that was doing the landing? At the very beginning of the video, it was just a split second, but it was a tank or an IFV that was getting off of it and going onto the beach. What was that? Not the tank or IFV. What was it that was actually coming up for the landing? And with this, we've talked about this. The Soviets are the big threat to basically everybody, but certainly to the region over there. And the Soviet Union falls, and there's sort of not, NATO had this same issue that it's kind of floundering and doesn't really know what its military capabilities that it's been building up specifically for the Soviet Union, what it's there for.
They also received a new round of modernization, with the introduction of top-of-the-line platforms like the CV-90 infantry fighting vehicle and the Leopard 2 main battle tank. Now, with NATO and Russia staring each other down in the Baltics, the Swedish Armed Forces is putting forth plans to expand its rapid reaction capabilities, increase readiness, and bring back the division. In this video, we're taking you through Sweden's Rapid Reaction Brigades, with a more in-depth look at their tank and armored infantry unit organization, equipment, and doctrine. I'm your host Brendan, and this is Battle Order. First, I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters who allow us to cover more interesting but less popular topics. If you want to help Battle Order grow and get a bunch of perks, including early access to videos and patron-only chat on our public Discord server,
that is such a big issue. I totally feel his pain. That, there are things that like are really super interesting to me and probably 12 other people on this planet that I'm always just like, I can't do that because literally everybody else will hate it.
Consider supporting us at patreon.com/battleorder. But on to the topic at hand. When the Swedish Army implemented its Rapid Reaction Organization plan for 2014, its professional forces were reorganized into 8 maneuver battalions and a number of independent units. They constitute Sweden's High Readiness Combat Force, which is complemented by numerous support battalions, reserve battalions, and Home Guard territorial defense battalions that bring its total.
Was this done in response to Crimea? Or was it just sort of like happenstance that it happened around that same time?
Total force structure closer to 70 battalions. The focus of this video is Sweden's Mechanized battalions, which consist of a combination of main battle tanks and infantry fighting vehicles carrying armored infantry. Sweden's full-sized mechanized battalions include the 41st and 42nd Battalions under the Skaraborg Regiment, the 191st and 192nd Battalions under the Norrbotten Regiment, and the 72nd Battalion under the South Scania Regiment. Additionally, just in January 2020, part of the 18th Battle Group stationed in Gotland was reflagged as the 181st Mechanized Battalion. Although this
is the South Scania one there just in case the Danes decide to get frisky at some point?
Battalion is about half the size of the other mechanized battalions. During peacetime, mechanized battalions are grouped into regiments and trained at their home garrisons, but when activated for war, they reorganize and deploy into the 2nd and 3rd Brigades. When this happens, each brigade receives a headquarters and separate recon company from the regiments. These staff are each supported by a brigade command company detailed from the command regiment. As its maneuver elements, each brigade then gets an infantry battalion from the Skaraborg, South Scania, and Norrbotten regiments. 2nd Brigade ends up with 2 mechanized and 1 light mechanized battalion, while the 3rd Brigade gets 3 mechanized battalions. Each brigade is then supported by an artillery battalion, an air defense battalion, an engineer battalion, and a logistics battalion attached from their respective regiments. However, this won't last forever. With the threat of getting caught in the middle of a conflict between NATO and Russia growing, the Swedish armed forces plan to expand their forces with a refocus on larger scale operations. As indicated by their most recent budget requests, 2nd Brigade would be
That mask looked freaking awesome.
organized into the 4th Mechanized Brigade in Skövde, while 3rd Brigade would become the 19th Norrland Mechanized Brigade in Boden. Meanwhile, a completely new 7th Mechanized Brigade, probably based on the South Scania Regiment, would be formed in Ravinghed, while the motorized 1st Infantry Brigade would be formed in Maladalen. The Gotland Battle Group will also be strengthened. These brigades may be integrated into a new division if mobilized, Sweden's 1st Division since it dissolved its last one in 2004. But back to the present. The real punching power of Sweden's rapid reaction forces comes from its mechanized battalions. Very similar to an old American combined arms battalion, each Swedish battalion is equipped with an equal mix of main battle tanks and infantry fighting vehicles with organic fire support, recon, logistics, and pioneers. They consist of 1 battalion headquarters, 1 staff and support company, 2 tank companies, 2 armored infantry companies, and 1 logistics company. Starting from the top, the battalion HQ includes 29 personnel, with a battalion commander, their deputy, a sergeant major, and several staff officers and supporting personnel. The staff and support company, meanwhile, includes the command platoon, which supports battalion staff officers, mans command posts, and provides signal support to the HQ. The staff and trains platoon, which provides logistical support to the company. A reconnaissance platoon with 4 CV-90 IFVs split into a platoon HQ in 4 sections. 2 mortar platoons, each with 4 Mjolnir 120mm self-propelled mortars based on the CV-90. And an anti-aircraft platoon with 4 40mm self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, also based on the CV-90 chassis. Next up, the logistics company provides sustain.
Yeah, we've looked at, if not all, certainly the vast majority of these different sort of variations off of the CV-90. And so this is actually really interesting to see kind of how they are brought in and sort of implemented together as a group.
Sustainment and mobility support to the battalion. It includes a company HQ and trains, a fuel and ammunition supply platoon, a repair platoon with 1 repair team per maneuver company, among other elements, a medical platoon with 4 teams manning ambulance variants of the BV-410 tracked APC, and lastly, a pioneer platoon, which provides mobility and demolition support to the battalion. Among other things, it includes 3 CV-90s carrying 3 pioneer sections, as well as an armored bridge layer based on the Leopard 2. And now on to what everyone's been waiting for, the maneuver.
Will there be any, I have not seen it yet, but will there be any bridge layers over in Ukraine? This is one of the things that I was talking about with the video on Western armor, was there are other things that are sort of ancillary to the armor itself that really sort of need to be there for the armor to be as effective as it can be. I'm curious about that. Somebody let me know.
First, the primary offensive capability of the Mechanized Battalion are its tank companies. The main feature of these companies is Sweden's main battle tank, the Stridsvagn 122, a variant of Germany's improved Leopard 2A5. It's equipped with a 120mm smoothbore tank gun as its main armament and crewed by 4 soldiers. Each tank company consists of a staff and logistics platoon, commanding and supporting 3 tank platoons. The former includes 2 tanks, one for the company commander and one for their deputy. The rest of the platoon comes under the separate administrative control of a platoon commander and deputy commander who ride in a forward command variant of the CV-90. They're in charge of service and support elements in the company. Each company is supported by forward observers with their own CV-90. They're equipped with sensors and laser rangefinders to aid in calling in fire missions in support of the company. Integrating fires is key to Combined Arms Doctrine, as indirect fires create situations where friendly forces can maneuver and limits the enemy's ability to employ countermeasures.
The archers are awesome.
Previously, the dedicated forward command and forward observation variants of the CV-90 were only armed with a machine gun. However, we've been told that now, regardless of specialty function, most CV-90s will be equipped with a 40mm Bofors autocannon in the future. In terms of logistical support, the Swedes are unique. Each company...
So the idea there being that they're there for logistics and support, and so they're not really going to, like, they're there as like the support element, so everybody else is there to get into the fight. Is that the thought process as for why they at least in the past have only had the machine gun?
Depending on the parent unit, weather conditions, and terrain, can be supported by 2 BV-410 armored carriers with a flatbed rear module rather than the standard cargo trucks. Similarly,
BV-10s localized in northern units, common in southern units. Okay. Because of the weather.
the Swedes use a third BV-410 ambulance for all-terrain medical evacuation. Unlike the cargo variant, the ambulance variant seems to be more universal amongst the companies. These tracked, articulated APCs have all-terrain capabilities. This means that each company has a limited logistics and medevac capability that is amphibious, can deal with harsher terrain and snow better than regular trucks, and are protected against rifle fire, mines, and shrapnel. And lastly, maintenance support for the company is provided by the...
I swear there have been 2 or 3 different things that I've looked at from Sweden that I just would not have expected to be able to swim, and they've been able to.
Maintenance variant of the CV-90, the STRF 9040 DSG, short for the Driftstots Group, or the Operations Support Group. This vehicle carries the company's chief technician as well as a number of mechanics. The company also has a variant of the German Panzer III Buffel to allow for recovery of immobilized tanks and armored vehicles under fire. All of this supports the company's close combat elements. Each platoon consists of 3 tanks, crewed by a tank commander, gunner, loader, and driver, with the platoon leader acting as the commander of the first tank and the deputy platoon leader commanding the third tank. This gives each Swedish tank company 11 MBTs in total, or 22 for the entire mechanized battalion. And now on to the armored infantry companies, which support the tank's mission with infantry fighting vehicles and dismounted infantry. The companies are organized very similarly, consisting of a staff and logistics platoon and 3 armored infantry platoons. The staff and logistics platoon structure is almost identical with some minor differences. First, the company commander and their deputy are transported in STRF 9040s rather than tanks. Second, rather than a tank-based armored recovery vehicle, the armored infantry company is equipped with one based on the CV-90. At the platoon level, like in the tank companies, the armored infantry also have 3 vehicles. The platoon further breaks down into a platoon headquarters and 3 infantry groups, each with their own IFV lettered E, F, and G. The platoon commander, their deputy platoon commander, and a vehicle commander command the vehicles for F, G, and E respectively. In some units, the platoon leader gets a spare vehicle commander that can take over the vehicle if they dismount. However, perhaps more interesting is a spare NCO called a Navstridsledare. Translated literally as Close Combat Leader, this NCO is a dedicated dismounted commander who, on the orders of the platoon leader, takes command of the dismounted element separate from the vehicles. This allows the platoon leader to stay mounted and maintain
Interesting. That's an interesting sort of tweak there.
a closer control over the vehicles while the groups are dismounted.
Yep.
Depending on the unit, the dismounted commander could also be one of the squad leaders given the extra duty. As for those infantry groups, each one of them is split into a mounted and dismounted element. The mounted element includes a driver and gunner who functionally are controlled by their respective vehicle commanders. The dismounted element, meanwhile, consists of 6 soldiers. The group leader typically ranks Führer or Oberführer, being intermediate NCOs with some time in grade. They're typically armed with an AK-5C rifle, a derivative of the FN-FNC with an M203 grenade launcher. They're assisted by a deputy group leader who typically ranks corporal, the first rank attained after completing squad leader training. Then there is also an anti-tank gunner, anti-tank loader, machine gunner, and a rifleman, doubling as a combat lifesaver. The Swedish run a weapons locker concept where multiple weapon systems of differing capabilities may be employed depending on the situation. The group can take out any combination of machine guns and AT weapons, with the platoon commanders being able to customize the layout to their liking. For anti-tank options, the AT gunner and loader may man a Carl Gustav or coilless rifle. Alternatively, they could leave the Carl G behind and act as riflemen if the group needs to be more mobile or it's unnecessary. In this case, they may or may not be armed with AT-4 disposable anti-tank weapons, which are essentially one-shot versions of the Carl G munition. Other personnel in the squad, like riflemen or leadership, can also carry AT-4s. Additionally, NLAW's short-range fire and forget anti-tank guided missiles are available to substitute the AT-4s, held in the Battalion Logistics Company. This provides the group a reliable tank killer capability, as even the Carl Gustav munitions would be of questionable effectiveness against most modern main battle tanks from the front. Being a force that may be called to block enemy movement in support of tank operations, each IFV also has several anti-tank mines. These can be employed by the dismounted element to deny area to or delay the advance of enemy mechanized forces. As for automatic weapons, the machine gunner can either take out the KSP-90, the Swedish version of the Mini-Me light machine gun chambered in 5.56.
Sorry, he was saying 5.56. I cut him off there. So I view everything, I literally cannot stop. I view everything through some sort of historical perspective. And as I'm watching this kind of lay out the whole works and how things would actually sort of be placed in a hot conflict and sort of what everybody's roles would be, I think of World War II and just how much our general tactics of dealing with main battle tanks has changed from what it was in World War II to what it is now. And or at least I'm looking at it as, okay, well, you have your MBTs out there, and your MBTs can go fight MBTs, but you also have IFVs out there, and they may be actually tank hunting like around your MBT concentrations. And so it's this thing where, like, through the prism of World War II, it's like, of course, these tanks are going to find each other and end up fighting each other. But the tactics work totally different today, where you're almost like your MBT finding another MBT could almost be like, we messed up, or like it got through, or something like that. Like, I don't know. That's just it's sort of like a very interesting twist and sort of view into the way that main battle tanks are handled today versus how they were when they were sort of a relatively new phenomenon.
Or the KSP-58, which is their version of the FN mag chambered in 7.62. If the mag is taken out, the last rifleman would act as an assistant. However, we've also seen numerous videos of groups dismounting with...
If anybody on here, is in one of these roles, or actually, even if you're not, even if you're just military, what's your preference on firearm if you were going into some sort of hot operation? What's your preference on firearm? Not, that's kind of a hard question to answer because you don't know the what you're actually going to do in this like general hypothetical conflict. But if you had your druthers, what would it be that you picked?
2 light machine guns. And the Instagram manager for Roma Company, the armored infantry company stationed on Gotland, states each group has 2 light machine guns and 1 general purpose machine gun at their disposal depending on the situation. Generally speaking, in training footage we've seen, the light machine gun seems to be preferred for restrictive terrain and when fighting mounted, while the general purpose machine gun is preferred in open country with longer sight lines. Another new weapon that's hit the Swedish Army is the AK-4D Designated Marksman Rifle, a version of Sweden's G3 variant. It provides the group a slightly longer range and more precise fires, but is not utilized here as a dedicated sniper rifle. We've been told the groups have the option of giving it to the rifleman or deputy group leader if necessary. As per Swedish doctrine, armored infantry support the action of tanks and enable their maneuver. They may do this through direct support, protecting open flanks, clearing captured terrain, and protecting supply lines. In a meeting engagement against an enemy mechanized force, the infantry may also be used to fix or delay forces with the CV-90, anti-armor weapons, and anti-tank mines, while tanks counterattack and target the enemy's vulnerable rear areas. The dismounted capabilities of the armored infantry are necessary to perform certain functions, such as in the defense or in restricted terrain. However, at the battalion level, the focus of the armored infantry is on supporting the tanks. Meanwhile, at the platoon level and lower, the main task of dismounts is to protect and enable the infantry fighting vehicle. This was a key shift from the Cold War era focus on the dismounted fight, when armored infantry were transported in the less capable Panzerbandwagen 302 armored personnel carrier. The change was likely due to the adoption of the more capable Stridsfordon 90, which is able to engage in close combat against mechanized forces in a way the legacy platform could not. The most clear indication of the shift was in the change of the platoon structure itself. During the Cold War era, platoons had a dedicated vehicle commander who would take over command of the APCs while the platoon commander and their deputy dismounted. This suggested a stronger emphasis on the dismounted fight, because the platoon commander and platoon deputy could exercise more direct control over the dismounted infantry while the vehicles maneuvered to directly support the infantry, protect a flank, or conduct an independent mission. This is the opposite of the current situation, where the platoon commander exercises more direct control over the vehicles and often delegates command of the dismounts to an NCO. Additionally, it's very
This is what I talked about earlier with the platoon leader having control of the vehicle and then sort of delegating responsibility to the to whoever it is, whoever is going to take the lead whenever they get boots on the ground.
very common to see Swedish armored infantry shooting from the rear hatches of the vehicle while moving. There's space for 4 soldiers to stand at the hatches at any time, providing security and possibly returning fire. This capability may allow the Swedes to conduct higher tempo maneuvers. Since infantry can stay mounted for longer, the mobility of the CV-90s and the Leopard 2s aren't hampered as bad by the speed of dismounted infantry. But of course, there are downsides to fighting mounted rather than dismounted. For example, the effectiveness of the infantry's fire when the vehicle is moving at any sort of speed is questionable, and they're unable to properly clear terrain while doing so. This tactic is probably partially situational, such as reacting to an ambush in close terrain or providing general security, but it's certainly represented more in Swedish training than with their counterparts in the US Army, for example. There are, of course, exceptions, such as—
Sorry, I'm kind of half laughing. We got into like a big discussion about this on Discord yesterday. That was dumb, and it was over something dumb over the hatch. So that's sorry.
holding ground or fighting in restrictive and complex terrain or urban environments. However, even in defensive situations, Swedish Doctrine places a premium on mobility to quickly mass and concentrate forces wherever the enemy may choose to attack. A passive and static defense is not the calling card of the mechanized battalions, who likely don't have the bayonet strength to excel at many of the dismount-centric functions that the lighter forces with more infantry do. As for how these units combine arms, or pair tanks and infantry to make up for each arm's weaknesses, the Swedish system is much like what the American combined arms battalions were like before 2016. In a typical situation, each tank and armored infantry company would trade a platoon with the opposite type of company. So they'd end up with 2 companies with 2 tank platoons and 1 infantry platoon, and 2 companies with 1 tank platoon and 2 infantry platoons. In other, more fleeting situations, they can form 1-to-1 company pairs, which would entail pairing down to the group level. In other words, each tank being paired with its own IFV. Company teams can then be further reinforced with battalion and brigade assets depending on the mission. This could include pioneers or even bridging assets from the battalion logistics company if a team needs mobility support on the battlefield. Similarly, the company could receive brigade engineers as attachments or battalion anti-aircraft support. If you enjoyed this look at Sweden's mechanized battalions, check out this video on Canada's mechanized infantry.
Okay, so that was the Guide to Sweden's Armored Force. Good video, I thought. Some really interesting information on how they're basically broken down. We've done a lot of videos on the actual armor itself, almost on every piece of equipment we saw in this video. But this was a really interesting look at sort of how it's put all together. Remember, as always, to like, comment, subscribe, help me keep building the channel over here. If you have anything you want to add or talk about or anything to do with this video or another video, have any recommendations for future videos, just put them down in the comments. I read every comment I see. I read probably 99% of them. Sometimes 1 or 2 will get through, but I try to read them all. So put them down there. I'll see it. And yeah, I'll see you all next time.